Well, hello and welcome back to the Qredible live broadcast. We are very excited for today's episode. We're going to be hearing from spotlighting a trailblazing force in Washington's cannabis scene. So Washington State has launched Fireweed Cannabis Co., which is a proudly Indigenous-owned shop that after just 1 year of operations has already made waves, being named the best cannabis shop in the East Side by 425 magazine. And so joining us today is Robbie de Los Angeles. He's the store manager and key voice behind Fireweed's vision. We're going to talk today about what it means to build a community-first cannabis retail store, how the store's warm environment is reshaping the customer experience, and the deeper significance of Indigenous entrepreneurship in this fast-growing industry. So whether you're local to Snoqualmie or just curious about the future of cannabis and culture, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. I practiced, I promise.
Like an hour, but you were there, right? She was close, Robbie, right?
It was good. It was good.
Well, Robbie, we're so thrilled to have you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, Robbie. You've got a really unique background that you bring into this this cannabis world. Would love to hear sort of a little bit about yourself and how your retail background and transition into cannabis in 2024, how that's really leading your leadership within the Fireweed Cannabis brand, which, by the way, I want to show a quick picture of the dispensary. I think it's a really cool looking dispensary. So love it. So talk to us a little bit about your background and how you sort of view retail and how you look at the cannabis product in general in making it unique for the community.
Yeah. So I started in retail the summer of 2011 with the Snoqualmie Tribe. We opened up a fireworks stand that summer. And then from there, I got into as a stocker, stocking shelves, cigarettes, and alcohol at our first store, the Snoqualmie Tobacco Company and Liquor Store. And then from there, we opened up Crescent Market at Snoqualmie and was there from 2017 to 2024. And that's when the remodel of the building was finished and we were able to open up Fireweed Cannabis Company on the east side of that building, and which is kind of matching that aesthetic of the rest of the store. And that's also when I met and started working under my mentor, John Wilson, who really gave me the better foundation of retail and kind of take it in from having to build all these businesses together and him showing me the way. It really helps going into the next building, the next business.
So that's awesome. So, we were talking a little bit before I don't know how much of our viewers, our audience really understands the intricacy of and the difference of sort of how this is different from, I hate to say the normal cannabis market, but the mainstream cannabis market versus what you're able to do here through the Snoqualmie Tribe. And what are those benefits? Because it appears that you're not the only one in Washington. There's maybe 50 or 60, I think, in Washington.
Yeah. So the main, I guess, difference here is yes, there's 29 federally recognized tribes for the state of Washington. Not all of them engage in cannabis, but the ones that do, we're not necessarily subject to all of the same 502 Washington state regulations and laws, because we're a sovereign nations and we're treated as such in a lot of different regards, not all the time, but most of the time. And Washington state's made it very clear that they want to honor the sovereign status of tribes and with regards to cannabis, and they're letting us kind of more hands off and just, okay, well, as long as you're still remaining compliant on some of the key things and are in compliance with your interactions with the other 502 businesses, we're pretty good.
So that means they're not taxing the heck out of you like they are everybody else, and putting excessive rules.
So that's the biggest advantage. Tribes don't get into selling alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis, gambling, because it's something that we necessarily like. It is the tax revenue, and that tax revenue goes back to the tribe. The tribal government to fund its programs for not just its people, but also its departments that help the surrounding area, like the ENR, ecological department. Making sure those things are happening, and that's supported by tax dollars. These businesses. But yes, you are right. The taxes are extremely high for cannabis. Here in Washington State, it's 37% excise tax plus the local sales tax, which for us is 9.1%. So almost you're getting near 50% of your cost is just taxes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really shocking, and it makes it really hard to do business when everybody's kind of aware of that, but we just all kind of accepted that that's the reality, and there isn't too much more that seems to can be done with it. Maybe there are people that can work on it, change it, make it more fair to the others that are not tribal dispensaries, because all the other non-tribal are having to send that tax money to the state, and that's killing their bottom line.
So it also must be, we were talking a little bit about this earlier, as sort of like culture shock, where you've got somebody that comes in from sort of the mainstream cannabis industry, and here, as it relates to your sovereign ability or freedom, right, that you literally have a regulatory autonomy and flexibility, which drives more self-regulation, that is probably very different in how you operate internally versus how, somebody comes in from a mainstream cannabis dispensary. They're probably in shock and thinking you're breaking all sorts of laws, I would imagine.
Yeah, yes, that's 100%. My assistant manager, actually, he ran a dispensary right at the start of COVID. It kind of closed down, and he stepped out of that industry. But when we first met and started working together, there was a lot of questions, because it's like, wait, we can't do that. But then, no, we can, because we're on the reservation, sovereign tribe. We have sovereign rights. We can self-determine on this. So we can kind of change the internal controls and just run normal business. The underlying principle and advantage to that is the fact that we don't have to abide by some of these arbitrary regulations and roadblocks, and we can just, hey, we're just going to treat it like a normal business.
Now, I know Washington, like one example, I think it's an example, but Washington does not really allow vertical integration.
Correct.
Right. But you can be vertically integrated.
Yeah. If I recall correctly, there's 5 different licenses for the state, and we could possess all 5 of them.
Wow, that's wonderful. And I know that a lot of states do that because they're trying to avoid sort of the big MSOs being a monopoly, right, in a particular state. But because this is for the community, right, for this revenue generation, and the benefit of having that sovereign status is really to provide crucial revenue streams for the tribal government, right, which is, supports public health and education and community development, and in typical areas that may face typical economic challenges. So the benefit makes sense to me, right? I think it's really important that that it be specified that you have to sort of be this self-sustaining ecosystem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that the sovereign benefits make sense. But I would imagine it is shocking if you're used to the standard process. But I think it also, what I really want to talk a little bit about is, this is also important to the community and social impact. I would imagine, relative to job creation and direct community benefits, as you were talking about, the tax revenue and profits from the tribal cannabis business, get reinvested into the community. Can you educate us a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's all these businesses that we open, especially Fireweed. There is an opportunity for the tribal members that meet qualifications to have a job, a position there. Mm-hmm. It definitely creates a lot of jobs for the locals. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong in this, but just generally speaking, Snoqualmie Tribe, I believe, is the biggest employer for the Snoqualmie Valley, with the casino, Crescent Market, and Fireweed, and so on and so on. When we really try to make sure, also, when we're able to utilize our sovereignty to collect revenue streams in different ways, such as all the excise tax for cannabis, is to not only reinvest it into the surrounding communities, our tribal community, but also the employees, the team members. We're able to also offer full benefit package, and actually good medical, dental, and vision. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
You know,
But you still have like challenges of access to banking and
yes,
because
yes.
I mean it's not like your sovereign status gives you the ability to open the Bank of Snoqualmie, right? So that'd be nice. It'd be pretty cool.
It would be. And that's actually one of the roadblocks that I ran into within the first month or so of opening the store. Was I'm thinking normal retail, the retail that I just came from, and I could do, A through Z in any which way you could think of. It's all gravy. Everybody loves it. But then trying to do those same things for cannabis, it's roadblock after roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. Even basic things like being able to sell a multi-pack. If you have a single, okay, that's great. Everything is sold as singles, but what if I want to sell a case? Can I sell the case and have 24 of that inventory removed from my system? No, I can't do that. And there's not enough demand for it. It also violates state limits, so that's not going to happen. And there's not enough tribal influence to push the web developers or software developers to implement that. But it would be something, because it is something that we can do, because we can circumnavigate the state limits.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't think about that. So it's not like you're writing your own software, right? You're using commercial off-the-shelf software, which probably has some controls built into it that are based on the normal way of doing business, right? The regulated way of doing business. So you have some limitations there.
Yeah.
That's it. I didn't even think about that aspect. That's interesting. What are some of the, I mean, obviously I think we've talked somewhat about the perceived advantages that that you have relative to tax benefits and a little bit more, let's say, regulatory autonomy. What are some of the unique barriers that sometimes outweigh those benefits?
Well,
banking and finance has to be one of them.
That's the biggest one. That is legitimately the biggest one. If
have you had any pushback from state and federal, like any other, any of the authorities?
No pushback. Knock on wood, no pushback. But yeah, banking and money handling is probably the biggest one that is the most anxiety inducing. As an example, as a apples to apples comparison, we have two cash heavy businesses in the same building, and the Crescent Market can partner with Garda or Loomis to have their cash picked up every single day, and they can have coin and cash dropped off every single day. I, on the other hand, cannot use Garda or Loomis, and I have to use a second or third party courier that can only deliver to me once a week and can only pick up for me once a week, versus just that daily. It's safe. It's an actual armored truck. It's going to take a lot to have that compromised. Same with the people handling the cash from the building and so on. But with us and cannabis, even though we're on sovereign land, we're still having to use that outside party and, Garda, Loomis, because they deal with federal accounts and federal money and all that kind of stuff. They don't want to have it. So that's a roadblock.
Now you're also not allowed to sell off reservation, right? So everything's got to be within the borders.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything's in the borders. We do still have to try to maintain the good neighbor relationship with the state. We don't want to go too far and cause massive problems, because there's so many different issues that the state and the tribe are working together on. It's not good to just go full bore on one of them and sour the relationship across all these other avenues, where it's really important for the larger impact of the community, not just the tribal community, but the local community as well. So then that's where we're still like IDing, customers, because it's a state regulation. It's meant to keep people safe. We're responsible vendors. We want to make sure that that's happening. Regardless of our sovereign status, we don't want a minor to buy cannabis, just like we don't want a minor to buy alcohol.
Right.
We're carding everybody. But yeah, that is probably the biggest hurdle, is just the money aspect of it. When you're trying to make sure that your team members are able to get loans, for their homes, cars, whatever. We've gone so far as to make sure that we don't refer to them as bud tenders on any official documents. They don't get paid from the dispensary either. So that way, they can get loans in it. And if they slip up and say something to the loan officer or whatever, that's on them. We did our part. But but the fact that we even have to think about it is a roadblock, is a time waste, in my opinion. I mean, it's good for them, but it could just be a better, fairer industry where it's not a problem.
Well, I was just talking to, I come from the residential mortgage industry. I spent many years in that industry, and I was just talking to a friend who told me that there's a new loan program out that could be used for people in the marijuana business. Of course, it doesn't go through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac like most of the mainstream loans do. So I'm going to do a show on this called Mortgages and Marijuana. And because it's just so crazy to me that people are that derive their income from this industry, right? And despite the fact that the United States can tax them, right, on the income, they won't give them a mortgage. It's prohibitive to have a mortgage loan. So It makes no sense to me, but
it really doesn't, especially when at the end of the day, we're not sitting around a shop smoking weed all day long. We're actually working. Exactly. We are actually working, and everybody in the industry is actually working hard to do what they need to do, because it's their job and they care about it, or
absolutely,
they're in between things. It doesn't matter. We're workers, and we're working, doing a job. To have financial roadblocks because of that is pretty ridiculous to me.
I think there must be some type of vision that people have, of people in the industry, that they're sitting around the building like stoners, smoking pot all day, listening to Pink Floyd. But the thing is I've met so many business owners and so many business professionals, and they're professional. I mean, it's like they're running a business like any regular business. They're very serious about it. I don't think I've ever walked in and seen somebody like, "Hey man, what do you want today?" I mean, it's very professional.
Yeah.
And I think like people view something much different. It's crazy. I don't know. Maybe I did at one point before I entered the industry. But it's interesting when you look at the tribal cannabis landscape. I think so. You said there were 29 federally recognized tribes in the state, right? And about 22 of them or so have signed agreements with the state. Is that right?
I think that's about right. Yeah,
something like that. So the and it was interesting. I think I was reading that one of the tribes decided they didn't want to do this because of health factors, but I don't know. I think it was the Yakima Nation that prohibits cannabis to their lands due to cultural or public health concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine. But to me, when I think of sort of these indigenous communities, and I mean, it's like you're the ones who taught us how to live off the land, not very well because we didn't do a good job at it, but yet, it's a natural product, grown here. So it's good to see that it's being that this program exists, because I think there's a great potential for these communities to even lead cannabis innovation. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because you're sort of free to roam about the cabin in a different way than
Mhm.
everybody else. So, what are your thoughts about how that leads to greater innovation within these native communities in ways that the other, businesses just they can't do it because of restrictions?
Well, one of the examples that I've been kind of kicking around a lot lately, or this idea, and the foundation of this kind of blew me away. Being so new to the industry, I didn't know that you're not allowed to recycle cannabis product, as in like the packaging, which is a huge thing. Like we can't recycle that. The farms can't recycle that. Producers can't recycle that. But yet, we all know that that glass jar, is probably going to get, once it's done, once you finish your ounce, you're probably going to throw that into your recycle waste bin.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's glass, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to get taken off to the recycling facility. So now, as Mr. Customer, I'm a bad person because I've contaminated the waste supply. But everybody's doing that. So the law for saying that we can't recycle doesn't make sense, but yet we are throwing these things in recycling on our personal time. Or the disposal all-in-one vapes, those have lithium batteries in them. We're not recycling those. We're just throwing those in the garbage. And maybe some people are more conscious about it and actually have easier access to recycling batteries, but generally speaking, it's not a common thing. And then that kind of got me thinking, like, well, here's an innovative thing: is if we're going tribe to tribe, we're now fully outside the bounds of the state of Washington. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's another tribe in the state and there are several who have their own dispensaries as well as their own farms or their own extraction labs or whatever it might be. If I say, I'm going to order in from this other tribe, I'm going to order in their products, and specifically only that product, I'm going to offer some sort of discount or incentive to the customers for recycling their ounce jars of the flower. Now, can I take that jar, process it, send it back to the facility where it got packed or it got filled, back to that other tribe? They can refill it, reuse it, and then they're sending it back to me on next harvest. That seems like a fairly decent small innovation that I think could be impactful. It could make people feel differently about it. It might reduce the cost of the overall goods a little bit in the long run, especially if it's a smart container that can be constantly reused without too much effort into recycling it. Let's say if it's like a glass jar that's been laser etched with that company's logo and just having to replace a small sticker on the back of it that has the lot number, where it came from, and where it's going. And the rest of it just is run it through an industrial dishwasher, refill it, and send it back out. And not having to use too much extra transportation. If they're coming to drop off a new delivery, well, I can also send them back to their farm with a full case of empty jars, and they can reuse them.
That makes a lot of sense, but yet what's holding you back from that?
For us, it's just a partnership. It's just me talking to another tribe, putting in the structure and having the agreements, having all the your SOPs in place for that, and just going with it. The only other roadblock to that would be, are we now violating the good neighbor thing? Because we've completely circumnavigated the state of Washington. And we want to be cognizant of that. And that's it. But
yeah, but their current no recycling policy, I mean, nobody's paying attention to that. I mean, come on. You think what are they doing with this? They're throwing it in the regular recycling can with everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they collecting it in their backyard? And,
well, this is just it, right? Like and this is where I think that some of these laws were not written by people who understand what's going on. Because how much, let's say you have there's a product here in the state of Washington. It's called Sun Gaze. It's a seltzer. It has very little THC in it compared to how much actual like seltzer is in the can. It would probably take cases on cases and cases of empty cans to have enough THC to get somebody high. If those are all going into recycle waste bins and getting picked up and recycled, like it's probably not going to happen. Maybe a full can gets in there somehow. That's a problem, I suppose, but we all know people are doing their best to recycle here in Washington State on a personal level. So guarantee that stuff's making it into the recycle, making it into the garbage. And the thing that they're complaining about has already happened, and it's just behind the times now. And it's just hurting everybody else.
Now that sort of begs the question. You were talking about working with other tribes. Are you allowed to sell on a wholesale basis to another tribe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that,
I mean, there's a little bit of paperwork involved, and there's some different proper channels you still have to, work through, but we can totally go tribe to tribe.
that's awesome. I think that's incredible. So, I mean, when you look out into the future, what is it that excites you the most about the future of Fireweed Cannabis?
I think it's the growth and the consistent stability, the ability to normalize transactions at the dispensary. There's still a lot of, I don't see it as much today, but I did see it initially when we first opened. A lot of customers kind of sketched out about being in line at the dispensary. I don't want that. They shouldn't feel that way. We're not going to tell anybody that you're here or whatever. It's your business, and you're just a customer, and we're grateful that you are our customer, and we're not going to make you feel that way. We don't want you to feel that way.
Right.
So yeah, the growth of the company, maybe getting in some of that vertical integration going, just the continued refinement of what we have done so far, and developing the team into future leaders of the industry, hopefully, and maybe even opening up other stores. Really, the sky is the limit on this at this point.
That's awesome. And is there any limitations other than capital to opening new stores? I mean, because you don't really have to go through the standard licensing process, right?
The only other main barrier is actually trust land, and whether or not we have the extra land that's already in trust to operate off of. The land into trust process, it takes quite a number of years, depending on the administration. Sometimes it goes really fast. Sometimes it's a couple presidencies before it actually happens.
Yeah.
But that's the main other roadblock. It's just land into trust.
Well, that's awesome. So what advice would you give to any new entrants that's navigating this complexity of this industry?
I would say that if anybody's going into managing a dispensary, lean on retail, just regular retail. Understand that just because it's a dispensary, that doesn't mean that it doesn't require regular retail practices and standards. And that if you have standards for your inventory, apply those. If you have standards for your cash handling, apply those. If you have standards for your staff management or your managing of human capital, apply that. Don't negate those things just and focus solely on the product, because you'll miss a lot and you're going to have a lot of turnover, and it's going to be very stressful, and it might not be as successful as you had hoped by just focusing on the products.
That's interesting advice, because I think people sometimes forget that this is a retail experience. That's really what it is. It's a retail store, and people want to feel that they're being educated properly, that they're talking to somebody, they feel welcome, that they don't feel stupid if they're a newbie to this, right? that somebody can explain to them and help them sort of solve what it is they're trying to solve for. So that's good experience. So, Robbie, how can somebody get in touch with you if they wanted to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with me right now is just through my email, robbie.dlosangeles at aboveitallfcc.com. I'm in my email every day. And yeah, that would be the best way to get a hold of me.
That's awesome. Well, it has been wonderful having you on Qredible Live. I think you're doing great work for the community there. And we're excited to sort of follow, your continued progress there. And congratulations again on winning that great award. It was just recently, right? Just this week it was announced.
Yeah, we won Best Cannabis Shop by the readers of 425 Magazine. 425 Magazine is a East Side publication, so those who don't live in Washington or are familiar with the dynamics of Washington State, when people are talking about the East Side, they're talking about the 405 corridor, Bellevue, Redmonds, Kirkland, places like that, Issaquah, Sammamish, Snoqualmie, North Bend, Carnation, basically the Snoqualmie River Valley. And yeah, that's the very broad area. There's actually a lot of other fabulous dispensaries in that area. And one of them we did take the award from this year.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
that's
happy with
great.
it.
Well, congratulations and continued success to you and your team. And Joy, we have an off week next week, I think, on Qredible Live, and then we're back the following week. Who will we be hosting?
Yeah, so next week we'll be off, and then the week after we'll be speaking with Hannah Brand. So she is a sustainable cannabis cultivator who has worked out in California. So we're going to be interested to kind of hear from the other sides. We talked to retailer today. We're going to talk about the kind of origin point of the plant next time, and look forward to that.
Sustainability, and look, you're already driving innovation, Robbie, with the ideas of recycling, because it just makes sense.
It really does, and I think it makes sense to treat it like that, and also it makes sense to look at the product as produce.
Yeah, like lettuce, right?
Yep.
So makes sense. Well, Robbie, thanks again for joining us and continued success, and we hope to have you back here on Qredible Live once again. So we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.